All right, this last video on photosynthesis is going to be on photorespiration and special adaptations that plants have to deal with different environmental conditions. So what is photorespiration? Well, sometimes when the oxygen concentration builds up inside a leaf, plants have the ability to close their stomata. So sometimes plants will close their stomata to reduce water loss. And when they do that, carbon dioxide tends to get used up inside the leaf, and oxygen tends to build up inside the leaf. And if you're a normal C3 plant, like most plants are around here, the oxygen level, oxygen molecules will enter the Calvin cycle. When they enter the Calvin cycle, you're not getting any carbon entering the Calvin cycle, so you can't make sugar. So basically this thing spins, but it doesn't do anything. Okay, so that's bad for plants. We're wasting energy having oxygen enter the Calvin cycle. So some plants have developed special adaptations to deal with that process. Okay, and two plant types that are good at dealing with that are C4 plants and CAM plants. C4 plants specifically deal with it in one way, and CAM plants deal with it in another. We're going to talk about how these two different types of plants deal with the same problem. So, first off, we have a C3 plant. So C3 plants have a different setup in the middle. They have a epidermis on the outside, and then a palisade layer where they do most of their photosynthesis, and a spongy layer where gas is exchanged really easily, and then a vein that comes in and brings water from the ground into the leaf for photosynthesis. C4 plants have a different adaptation. They have epidermis on both sides, but they also have stomata on both sides of their leaves. And they have, where the water comes in, they have a layer of cells that's going to be doing photosynthesis. So instead of having it across the top of the leaf, it's surrounding the vein. And then they have another layer of cells that kind of divides the air space from the photosynthesis space. If we look at it in real life, this is a cross-section of a real C3 leaf. Okay, so here's our epidermis up top, and this is our palisade layer where we're doing photosynthesis, the spongy layer underneath, and then you got veins coming into the leaf. Okay, so this is what a C4 plant looks like. It's a little different. Okay, so we have our epidermis on the top, but then here's our photosynthetic layer right around the, and then you have another layer of cells in between the photosynthetic layer and the airspace. So think about it like this. Here's your photosynthetic layer. Here's your layer of cells between the photosynthetic layer and the airspace. Okay, so how does this work? Well, carbon dioxide in this case is not going to come in contact with rubisco, and neither is oxygen. So the fact that oxygen can bind with rubisco when the concentrations build up really doesn't matter, because the oxygen buildup inside the leaf doesn't come in contact with the rubisco. In this particular situation, we have another enzyme. It's called Pepsi, kind of like the pop, except PEPC. It's PEP carboxylase, and Pepsi has no affinity for oxygen. It only attracts carbon dioxide. So it binds carbon dioxide super well, and it doesn't bind oxygen at all. And so in this particular case, if we look at our picture over here, the carbon dioxide binds with Pepsi. It gets brought in to the Calvin cycle as a 4-carbon molecule. That's why we call it a C4 plant. So this 4-carbon molecule will drop off the carbon dioxide at the Calvin cycle and then go back and get more. That CO2 then doesn't have to compete with oxygen to move into the Calvin cycle. And so basically, it doesn't matter how high the oxygen concentrations build up inside a C4 plant or how low the CO2 levels get inside a C4 plant. They can still do maximum rate of photosynthesis with no photorespiration going on. This allows them to grow in really hot, dry climates. Some C4 plants that grow around here, crabgrass, that's why it does so well here in the summer, especially if you don't water your lawn that much, it still flourishes. Corn is a really good C4 plant. Does really well in hot, dry weather. Another adaptation. We can see here, this is pretty cool. Here's your C4 plants, the temperature that they like, and here's your C3 plants, the temperature they like. So it's significantly different. It looks like about 25 degrees Celsius is primo for C4 plants, and about 35 degrees Celsius is primo for, so you're talking mid to high 70s is best for C4 plants. Mid to high 90s is best for C3 plants, and mid to high 90s is best for C4 plants. And C4 plants can even handle temperatures that are quite warm. 40 to 50 degrees Celsius is pretty darn hot. C3 plants would shut down. C4 plants can do quite well even in those real hot temperatures. So if we get a real hot day in Michigan and it's in the hundreds, because it's ridiculous out, corn is going to thrive. In places where it's hot like that all the time, like Brazil, C4 plants do quite well. Sugar cane and corn and things like that grow super well down in Brazil. And here's kind of a grass distribution of the types of grasses we see. So if you go above this line, everything is C3. As we make our way south, it becomes more and more C4 plants. And as you get down into southern Mexico and Central America and South America, pretty much all the grasses are C4 grasses. Another way of dealing with carbon dioxide and oxygen and this whole photorespiration issue is to be a can plant. So what is a can plant? Well, a can plant is a plant that deals with really dry conditions by only opening its stomatas at nighttime. So they open their stomata at night. In the desert, it cools off tremendously at night. And so you might have a 50 or 60 degree difference between daytime temperatures and nighttime temperatures. So it might be 110 during the day, but then when you roll into nighttime, it's only 50 degrees out. And so when that happens, the air shrinks. So hot air expands. As that air condenses and gets smaller, it gets more humid. And so the desert conditions at night might be 70 or 80% humidity versus daytime might be 10 or 20% humidity. So by opening their stomata at night, they don't lose nearly as much water to the environment. So they're going to keep them closed during the day. They're not going to exchange any oxygen or carbon dioxide during the day. They're going to take in all their carbon dioxide at night, and they're going to store it. They store it as a molecule called crassulacean acid. That's where CAM gets its name, crassulacean acid metabolism. And so they store it as an acid, and then as they need it the next day, it gets released and it gets used by the plant. Couple of downsides to this. You can only store so much carbon dioxide each night, and so you can't do a whole lot of photosynthesis the next day. And so these plants can only do a couple hours of photosynthesis, even if it's like a nice winter day down in Arizona, maybe it was 80 degrees all day. They're only going to be able to do a couple hours of photosynthesis because they don't have enough CO2. And so they're limited how much photosynthesis they can do each day. And thus they don't grow very fast. It might take a 30-foot tall saguaro cactus 500 years to get that tall. Saguaros, this cactus that's right here on the right is a saguaro cactus. They get pretty tall, but this thing might be 500 years old because it's taken a long time to grow because it can't do very much photosynthesis. Couple common plants. Pineapples are can plants. Okay, and how many people thought pineapples grew on trees? They actually don't. They grow on little kind of stumpy plants. Like they almost look like corn but shorter, with pineapples growing on them. Pineapples is an example of a can plant, and sugar cane would be a good example of a C4 plant, or corn growing around here. Corn's a good example of a C4 plant.